Thanks, Hallie. Unless you want to trade places, I'll let you come up here and I'll ask questions. No? All right. I thought it was worth a shot. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right. Yeah. President Trump had a productive meeting at today's Republican Senate caucus. The president discussed the urgent need for the Senate to focus on cutting taxes for hardworking American families. We must also make American companies more competitive so they can create more jobs and boost wages for American workers. And we must simplify the burdensome tax code that is currently rigged in favor of the wealthy and well-connected. As the president tweeted this morning, the markets continue to hit historic highs and unemployment is at a 16-year low. There is a spirit of economic optimism sweeping the nation, but our economy cannot take off like it should unless we deliver historic tax cuts and reforms. This is the president's top legislative priority, and he was encouraged today by the show of unity by Republicans on the Hill about getting this done. During the policy lunch, the president also discussed the urgent need for the Senate to confirm his slate of eminently qualified nominees, in spite of Democratic obstruction, so that they can get to work on behalf of the American people. The president will continue to work closely with the Senate to deliver on a legislative agenda that puts the interest of the American people first. This morning, the president welcomed winners of the Minority Enterprise Development Week Awards. This awards program is designed to celebrate the outstanding achievements of minority entrepreneurs, as well as individuals and organizations that are leading the way in advancing minority business enterprise. The award winners who visited the White House certainly meet that criteria, and the president was proud to host them. He's laser focused on building an economy that works for all Americans and delivering tax cuts and reforms for these hardworking entrepreneurs by the end of the year. On the national security and foreign policy front, for the 8th time, Russia has blocked UN Security Council action to hold accountable those who use chemical weapons, including terrorists in the Assad regime. By blocking the extension of the joint investigative mechanism, Russia has once again demonstrated it does not care about stopping the barbaric use of chemical weapons in the world and will do whatever it takes to protect its ally, the Assad regime. Blocking the extension of the investigating authority means nothing less than Russia's endorsement of the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons against innocent women and children. We will continue to push back against this. And with that, I'll take your question.
Sarah.
President Trump has previously tweeted that Jeff Flake is a very weak and ineffective senator. Do you know if he has any reaction to Flake announcing that he won't seek re-election?
I haven't spoken with him directly since the announcement by Senator Flake, but I think that based on previous statements and certainly based on the lack of support that he has from the people of Arizona, it's probably a good move. Matt.
Thanks, Sarah. So we have two Republican senators now just today, Senators Corker and Flake, calling the president's behavior unacceptable and dangerous, saying that he regularly tells untruths. Senator Flake just called on his fellow Republicans to end what he called complicity and accommodation. I'm wondering what's the White House's response to this criticism coming from two Republican senators?
I think that we support the American people on this one. I think that the people both in Tennessee and Arizona supported this president, and I don't think that the numbers are in the favor of either of those two senators in their states, and so I think that this is probably the right decision.
Thank you, Sarah.
John.
Today, you earlier.
Sir, why is the president involved in this feud with Senator Corker? Is there some concern on Capitol Hill that what you should be focused on is getting your agenda of tax reform through, and that petty feuds like this just distract from the bigger issues? So why is the president engaging in this?
Look, the president is focused on doing this. That's what he spent the majority of his day talking about. He went to the Hill and met with Republican senators to talk about tax reform, to push his legislative agenda. That's what he's spending a good bit of this week doing, and will continue doing next week until we get the job done.
But why does he engage like this?
Look, you've got an individual in the president. He's a fighter. We've said it many times before. The people of this country didn't elect somebody to be weak. They elected somebody to be strong. And when he gets hit, he's going to hit back. And I think Senator Corker knows that. And he's, maybe trying to get a headline or two on his way out the door.
Sarah, thanks a lot, Sarah. Since the president's taken off in office, as you know, two Republican senators, Senator Corker of Tennessee and Senator Flake of Arizona, have both announced they're not running for re-election. In your view, is the president remaking the Republican Party? And if he's doing that, is he remaking it in a positive way?
I wouldn't say necessarily he's remaking it, because you have a couple of individuals that are no longer running for office. Look, he's got a great relationship with a number of Republican senators. He's going to continue working with them and make sure that we get things done for the American people. He wants people to be in the Senate that are committed to actually moving the ball down the field. And I don't think these two individuals necessarily have been as focused on that. The president wants to get things done, and that's what we're going to work through the fall. John?
So I understand that neither of these two senators we're talking about now have been allies, to say the least, of the president. But this has been an extraordinary series of attacks on the president from major figures in the Republican Party, and not typical political attacks. I mean, saying that the president is responsible for the debasement of the nation, that a breakdown of civility is the fault of the president, and that enough is enough. We've seen similar remarks from John McCain, the party's former nominee. In any of this, does any of this make the president pause and wonder if he is doing anything wrong, that he bears any responsibility
Look,
for
again,
what these senators are saying is a breakdown of civility in our country?
Look, I think the voters of these individual senator states are speaking in pretty loud volumes. I think that they were not likely to be reelected, and I think that shows that the support is more behind this president than it is those two individuals.
Why is there so little?
Yeah.
Why is there so little pushback from other Republican senators on this? I mean, Mitch McConnell is the Republican leader. Bob Corker is still a committee chairman. Should there
Look,
be?
Leader McConnell stood with the president just last week here at the White House and talked about how they were working together, how they were getting things done, how they were focused on actually moving the agenda forward. And so I think that's a pretty clear indication of where his support lies and what we're working to do.
If I could just pick up on what John was talking about, one of the criticisms from Senator Corker today was the idea that history will most remember President Trump for debasing the country. And you could hear in Senator Flake's remarks the idea that he seemed to be writing it for history. How do you think history will view not only the remarks of the two senators today, but also former President Bush last week?
I certainly think history is going to look at this president as somebody who helped defeat ISIS, who built an economy that was stronger than it's been in several decades, who brought unemployment to a 16-year low, who's created over 1.7 million jobs since being elected. I think those are the things that people actually care about, not some petty comments from Senator Corker and Senator Flake. And I think they're a lot more concerned about the big policy initiatives that this president is driving, including historic tax cuts, which we're going to get done by the end of this year, and then start focusing on some other things. Those are the things this president will be remembered by, and I think those are pretty good, certainly good facts, and ones that we're happy to stand on. Peter?
Thank you, Sarah. The president at lunch today asked the senators for their a show of hands on two candidates for Fed chair, Jerome Powell and John Taylor. Does this mean that Powell and Taylor are the president's favorites for the Fed chairmanship, and why would he ask input from the Senate on this?
Those are certainly individuals that he's looking at, and as we've said, we don't have any announcements on that at this time, but the president is taking that decision extremely seriously, and he's being very thorough in the process, and he'll have an announcement on it soon.
Sarah.
Sarah, are you concerned? Is the White House concerned at all that these conflicts, which keep escalating, could impact the president's agenda? I mean, specifically, could, for example, Senator Corker, if the president continues to, lash out at him like this, could that prompt him to, do things that can be detrimental to the tax code?
I would hope that Senator Corker is more focused on getting things done in his final months. And so we hope that he'll be very supportive of the tax cuts and tax reforms that the people in his state have demanded and frankly elected him to go to Congress and help do.
Could be a
So I'm going to
distraction,
pick up on that because the president in two different tweets today had said that Senator Corker was fighting tax cuts. Those were his words. Will now fight tax cuts and is now fighting tax cuts. But there's been nothing public from Senator Corker that he might be against tax cuts. So what exactly was the president suggesting or referring to there in those tweets? Has Senator Corker privately told the president or the White House that he's against tax cuts.
I don't know that he said he's against them, but he certainly indicated his unwillingness at this point to really step forward and work with the administration on getting things done. We hope that he will come around and certainly vote for tax cuts, as the people in his state have demanded and requested and pushed for him to do such.
Does the White House think that Flake, McCain, and Corker will eventually vote for tax cuts, all three of them, because you need all three of
I
them?
certainly think America hopes they do.
Thank you, Sarah. Last week I asked you if the president wanted Senator Corker to resign, and you didn't want to go there. In light of everything that has happened since, has the White House changed its position on that? And at the very least, does the president think that Senator Corker should step down as head of the Foreign Relations Committee, especially since Senator Corker told CNN today, and I quote, that he wants to investigate some of the things that he is purposely breaking down, he being President Trump?
Look, I think that's a decision for Leader McConnell in terms of who has those chairmanships. That's not something for the president to
The
determine.
president doesn't think that he should step down or that he should resign.
I haven't spoken to him specifically about that, but in terms of how the chairmanships are decided, that would be up to Leader McConnell. John?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Two questions. There is currently a contested primary for Senator Corker's seat. Congresswoman Blackburn facing former Congressman Fincher, and it's almost inevitable there will be a contested primary in Arizona. Dr. Ward not going to be left to get the nomination. Will the president take any role in the nomination process there?
As I've said many times before from the podium, I'm not going to weigh into any political races and whether or not the president will engage. It's not appropriate for me to do from here. Charlie?
The other thing, Sarah, is that in his penultimate salvo on Twitter, the president said that Senator Corker asked him to be Secretary of State and he refused the request. That's a pretty serious claim, because no one really has been proven to have asked for a job in modern times like that. Did Senator Corker actually ask the president to be his Secretary of State?
That's my understanding, but I don't know much beyond those initial comments. Charlie?
Is the president confident that Majority Leader Mitch McConnell can hold the Senate caucus together?
Yes, he is, and he thinks that we're going to work together with Republican senators, particularly Leader McConnell, to get tax cuts and tax reform done this year.
And is he upset by senators?
Why does the White House and the president specifically continue to say that Senator Bob Corker helped President Obama on the Iran deal when the facts clearly say that's not true?
Actually, the facts do say that it's true. It was Senator Corker who wrote the INARA legislation that legitimized the Iran nuclear deal. Despite lacking the votes to ratify the flawed Iran deal as a treaty in the Senate, Corker's bill rolled out the red carpet for the Obama administration, gaining congressional approval without the necessary votes. He may not have voted for it, but he certainly helped make it happen.
But he didn't vote for it.
But
I mean,
he
the Washington
helped allow
Post
it
has
to
given
take
4
place.
Pinocchios on this. If you look through it,
And as I've
Senator
said many
Corker
times
says it's a
before, I
lie.
wouldn't
Why
use
did-
the Washington Post as my source, Jeff. You
Exactly,
should know
but
better
this
than
is
that.
true. When you go back and look through
Jeff,
this, the
Mason.
White House clearly is not telling the truth on this. Why does the
Actually-
president continue to say that he helped President Obama with it? It's
Because
just
he
not true. He
did.
voted against it, though, Sarah.
He voted against it, but he allowed it to happen. He put it in motion. He rolled out the red carpet, and he made it possible for it to move forward. That is a fact, and that is true. Jeff?
Sarah, what do President Trump's advisors advise him about his use of Twitter? And on a separate, unrelated issue, is the president seeking to kill a deal between Boeing, or Boeing's deal to sell planes to Iran Air?
On the first one, I would say in regards to Twitter, as I've stated several times before from here, it's always a benefit for the president to be able to speak directly to the American people without any filter, without any bias. I think that's a positive thing. I think it's one of the reasons that the president is because he often goes directly to the American people, speaks directly to them, and I think that's a plus. And the second question, I'm not aware of that, any detailed conversations. I couldn't weigh into that right now.
Sarah, on Nishera, and I'm not going to ask you to talk about the ongoing investigation, but I do want to say the commander of U.S. forces in Africa told Congress last March that he had only a quarter of
the reconnaissance flights needed to do his job, and in fact, that did impact search and rescue missions. Is the White House concerned that U.S. forces in Africa do not have adequate resources and that could have contributed to what happened in Niger? And has there been any outreach by the White House to Nigerian officials?
As always, the safety and security of our military is a top priority. In terms of specifics, we're going to wait until that investigation is completed. As General Dunford said yesterday, we're going to make sure that we get full and adequate answers for not just the American people, but for the families of those that were lost. And we're going to continue to do that. The administration fully supports the Department of Defense in that process.
Has there been outreach from the White House to Niger?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check and circle back. April.
Sarah, back on Niger, an offshoot. The widow of Sergeant LaDavid Johnson is concerned that there may not be remains in his coffin. What does this White House say as she is not able to get anything more than dog tags as it relates to trying to put to rest all of this?
My understanding is that the family can request to see those remains, and that would be a process handled through the Department of Defense and the casualty officer, and I would refer you to the Department of Defense for specifics on that.
And one last piece on another subject really fast. Beyond personality, beyond the president's personality, beyond Flake, beyond Cocker, beyond McCain, at issue there's a divide, be it in the nation, be it in your own party. When is there an effort to unify? Because you have people saying in their own party, in the president's party, that the president is not helping to pave the way, and the path that the president's taken is wrong. When is there an effort for this president to start unifying, not just within the party, but with the country, because there's so many divides?
Yeah, every day there is an effort to unify. I think you see that in the policy initiatives that this president is pushing, tax cuts that affect everyone, particularly the middle class. I think that's something everyone should be able to rally around, whether you're Democrat or Republican. That should be something that brings everybody together. You look at the defeat of ISIS, you look at the growth of the economy, you look at unemployment. These are all things that should bring our country together, and certainly things that this president has been focused on and will continue to be focused on moving forward.
Sarah, the president is likening his tax cuts to what Reagan did, but as we all know, after those 1981 cuts, there were a series of tax increases, including the Social Security payroll tax increase, which affected middle-class Americans. Today, Social Security's fiscal situation is far more dire. What does the president have to say about his intentions when it comes to these entitlements once these tax cuts go through?
Look, the president said that he did not want to impact Social Security and wanted to make sure that we protected that. The biggest thing he's focused on right now, though, are those tax cuts and making sure that they're permanent tax cuts that really impact and help the middle class, and that's his biggest priority.
Cecilia? No changes?
Thanks, Sarah.
No changes?
Not at this time, no.
The three Republican senators have hit at the same theme, that there is this degradation of civility in American politics. And we also heard that from three past presidents in recent days. So does this White House agree with that sentiment, that there is a lack of civility in the conversation happening in this country right now from American politicians? And does this president bear any responsibility for that?
Look, I think we, as I've said before, we can always do better. And we're looking at ways every single day, as I just told April, to bring the country together, to focus on policies that really help people, really empower people, and do that for all Americans. That's this president's, what he laid out on the campaign, and that's what he's been focused on since he became president.
Thank you, Sarah. I wanted to ask you about the president's tweet in which he called Pastor Robert Jeffress a wonderful man. Given that there are 70 million American Catholics, why would he say that about somebody who's so viciously anti-Catholic?
I'm not aware of Robert Jeffress being anti-Catholic. I know that he engages with the Catholics in his home state on the regular basis to participate in events like the March for Life. Those are the only actions I've seen him participate in, so I couldn't comment any further on that. Brian?
Sarah, thank you. One of the aspects of civil discourse is for people in the discussion to acknowledge when they've made misstatements. And there's a pattern in this White House and with the president that when they make misstatements, those are not corrected. For example, the chief of staff came out here at this podium and mischaracterized the speech by a congresswoman given at an FBI building dedication. Why won't the chief of staff or you right now acknowledge that that was a mischaracterization and correct the record?
I don't believe that General Kelly mischaracterized. He gave his account of what took place. General Kelly and his family have made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. I think he's led with honor and integrity. I think he's doing a great job of chief of staff, and I don't think he has anything to correct or apologize for.
Just to follow up,
Hallie?
why wouldn't, even if President Trump meant to console the widow of Sergeant Johnson, why hasn't he or anyone from the White House apologized for how she took his call? She took his call as insensitive.
Look, the president was making the point that his call was meant to be respectful, sympathetic, and the purpose was to offer condolences on behalf of the nation.
Sarah, two quick questions for you. You talked about the president's big policy initiatives, that'll be how history judges him. Obviously, so far right now, he has none that have made it through the legislative process on Capitol Hill. He wants to get taxes done. Bob Corker's...
It's not true. No Gorsuch went through legislative process. I would say that's a pretty big historical moment.
I don't know if that's a policy initiative.
Something that has a lasting legacy, probably far beyond most any other individual piece of legislation, is how the courts can shape and determine a lot of different things. And I think you'll see that in Justice Gorsuch.
So to finish that first question then, you talk about, when we talk about policy initiatives, like I'm thinking of healthcare or, for example, tax reform that have not been completed, at least not yet on Capitol Hill. The lack of support from somebody like Bob Corker might make that a lot more difficult. Given that, does the president feel like he's winning?
I think he feels like America's winning. I think if you look at some of the progress that's taken place in the first 9 months, despite the fact that the Congress has done very little up until this point, the president has gotten rid of nearly 1,000 regulations that have paved the way for massive job creation and job growth in this country. We're looking at a booming economy. I think those are things that people actually care about. We're looking at the defeat of ISIS, something that this president has led on and worked with our coalition forces to help do. He's created better relationships with countries around the globe. He's bolstered the relationship with NATO and had other countries encouraged in the growth of the amount of money that other countries are participating in that. The historic moment that we saw with the president on his first foreign trip when he was in Saudi Arabia and he spoke in front of nearly 60 Muslim majority countries. These are historic moments that he's done without Congress. Imagine how incredible and how many good things we would be doing if people like Senator Bob Corker got on board and started doing their job instead of doing so much grandstanding on TV.
The president believes, Sarah, that there should be, my second question, Sarah, to give those comments, does the president believe there should be a loyalty test for Republican senators? Does he demand, you've mentioned several times.
Their loyalty should be to the American people and to the agenda that those people elected them to carry out.
I say that is where their loyalty lies.
Well, I hope we'll see that in their votes.
Sarah,
Dave, I'm sorry, Hallie, I gotta move on.
Have any reaction today to Chairman Nunes' announcement that he's going to open an investigation into the Obama administration's deal to allow Russia to compete to obtain U.S. uranium?
I haven't spoken with him directly about that, but I certainly think it is a move in the right direction and something that we've spoken about several times here, that if there was any collusion whatsoever during the campaigns of any point or any collusion at any point with another country, that they should look at the Clintons, and so I think that's the right thing.
Sarah? Thanks, Sarah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sarah, thank you. So the president regularly highlights the success of the stock market in his tweets. Only about 50% of Americans are invested in the stock market. And earlier today I spoke with Grover Norquist, a prominent conservative voice pushing for tax reform. I mean, he characterizes the economy and says, quote, the economy itself still sucks. So what's your reaction to that, and for those people who aren't benefiting from the success of the market right now?
Well, I think there's also a lot of other things beyond just the stock market. The fact that the unemployment levels have dropped, that's certainly a big thing. The fact that 1.7 million new jobs have been created since Donald Trump was elected, those are all positive things in the economy. We didn't say it was completely fixed in that, but we're certainly moving in the right direction. I think we've been more successful in these first 9 months than Obama was in 8 years.
Sarah, I have two questions. One is, we understand that when the president gets hit, he hits back, but what is he trying to accomplish when he says that Bob Corker couldn't win a race for dog catcher. What is he trying to accomplish?
Look, I think that the president is voicing the frustration that probably you see from a lot of people in the state of Tennessee, which is why Senator Corker's numbers are where they are.
Okay, my second question is, can you point to any votes that Flake and Corker took that were against the president's agenda?
I'm sorry?
Can you point to any votes that Flake and Corker took that were against the president's agenda?
I'd have to look detailed into their voting records, so I'll check on that.
So Sarah, thank you, Sarah. Two questions.
Thanks.
Both Andrew.
You said before that Senator Flake and Senator Corker's comments were petty. What exactly of Senator Flake's speech did you find to be petty?
I thought that his attacks and a lot of the comments that he made, I don't have a readout in front of me, but as I was watching it, I noticed that a lot of the language I didn't think was befitting of the Senate floor.
Nothing in particular.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask about Fed Chair, and I'm just interested if the vote that seemed to happen at the Senate meeting where you saw, where according to Senator Scott, John Taylor got the most votes, if that is going to influence the president's decision on that. And then just to follow up on Andrew's question.
Let me answer the Fed Chair question first. As I said earlier, the president is taking this decision very seriously, going through a very thoughtful and thorough review and interview process, and when we have an announcement on that, we'll let you know. He's talking to a lot of relevant stakeholders and individuals about this, and knows that it has a great deal of impact, this decision. And so again, he'll take his time and make sure he makes the right one and not just a fast one.
Sarah, thanks. To follow up on some of the questions that have been asked, how does fighting with members of his own party advance the president's agenda and his stated goals for the American people?
Look, the president is fighting for an agenda, and he has, as I've said, if he gets hit, he's going to hit back. And people didn't elect him to be weak. They elected him to be strong. And if he feels it's necessary to respond, he's going to do that. And at the same time, he can talk and chew gum at the same time. He's pushing forward on an agenda. It takes 30 seconds to send out a tweet, and he spends the bulk of his day working on and pushing policy initiatives like tax reform, like tax cuts, and that's what he is committed to doing.
Let me just follow up with you very quickly. There's some confusion around 401ks, and some Republicans are saying that's making their job to actually get tax reform done more complicated. So can you say here definitively that the Republican tax reform proposal will not touch 401ks?
That's the president's plan, and that's what he'd like to see Congress get on board with as well. He wants to make sure that we're protecting Americans' futures and Americans' retirements, and that's part of that process.
Thanks, Sarah. On the opioid crisis, we've seen the president organize a commission. We've seen him host meetings. He's used the word crippling, the words national emergency. We've seen the administration put more resources into law enforcement. And we've seen him take on this message of telling kids just not to start. But advocates for those who are addicted say they feel like they just haven't seen enough work towards helping people who are currently addicted. That there is a need for a huge rush of money to get more people into treatment. What's the president thinking right now, and can they expect anything in the coming days when it comes to getting help to those who are addicted and need treatment?
Absolutely. This is obviously a growing epidemic that the president is very committed to fighting against. He has been working with his policy advisors and his team diligently and all of the relevant components and agencies, and you'll see some more details on those efforts by the end of this week. And in the next couple of days, some specific announcements that the president said he would have. Thanks so much, guys. We'll be around the rest of the afternoon to answer these all questions. Have a good day.
Sarah, why hasn't the president implemented the Russia sanctions?
Right Side Broadcasting. I am Steve Lookner. This is the post show for the White House press briefing. We're going to talk about what happened in the briefing, and we're going to hear, most importantly, hear what you think about what happened in the briefing and about the big news events of the day. If you want to send in a comment, have me read it on the air, write to me on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner. And I'll have you note, once again, we show the whole event when a mainstream media network doesn't. CNN I had on the side here in the background about 10 minutes ago, they cut away from the Sanders press briefing to interview Jeff Flake. They couldn't wait to do it till after the briefing. They did it during the briefing. But we will always show you the entire event. And we will always show you the entire event, and we do it at the rallies too, whereas a lot of times the mainstream media networks don't show the entire President Trump rally. We show you the entire rally, not only just his whole speech, but all of the speeches, and we interview people in the crowd before and after the rallies. So we just want you to see the event. And not have it talked over and cut off. We want to see you the whole thing. You to see the whole thing. So if you like that kind of coverage, please consider making a donation, because we are viewer supported here at Right Side Broadcasting. Your donations are what keeps us on the air. So if you'd like to donate, you can go to the bottom of the YouTube chat and click on the $sign at the bottom of the YouTube chat, or you can go, this little $sign there, you can click on that, or go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. Okay, busy news day today. Want to hear what you think about it. I sent out a tweet before that showed that the first 8 questions of this press briefing were on Corker and Jeff Flake. So let me show you that. Here's the tweet I sent, I forwarded before, or I retweeted before, from Michael C. Bender. White House press briefing questions today. Flake and Corker, Corker and Flake and Corker, Flake, Corker, and GWB, Fed Chair Corker. So Jeff Flake, I'm sure you have heard this by now because you were watching the press briefing. He announced that he is not going to run next year. He announced this right before the press briefing, and he says he's not going to run. And he made a speech just before the press briefing. He made a speech in the Senate where he was critical of President Trump. I think I have a little bit of it here. This is from the Politico site. I'm getting this from Politico, and it's a C-SPAN clip. So let me play you a few seconds of this. Let me see what we have here.
It must also be said that I rise today with no small measure of regret. Regret because of the state of our disunion. Regret because of the disrepair and destructiveness of our politics. Regret because of the indecency of our discourse. Regret because of the coarseness of our leadership. Regret for the compromise of our moral authority. And by our, I mean all of our, complicity in this alarming and dangerous state of affairs. It is time for our complicity and our accommodation of the unacceptable to end.
So certainly Jeff Flake seemed there to be criticizing President Trump. And that happened right before the press briefing started. So anyways, that was asked about in the press briefing. That was asked about, and also the continuing feuding between President Trump and Bob Corker. Bob Corker, who also announced he's not running next year for Senate. But they sent some tweets back and forth this morning. Let me see if I can call you up a real quick an example of what was going on. Well, Bob Corker made comments this morning, and then President Trump tweeted a reply. So Bob Corker said this morning, Trump has great difficulty with the truth, and he said he would not support Trump in another election. He told that to CNN. And then in response, President Trump tweeted out, Senator Corker is the incompetent head of the Foreign Relations Committee, and look how poorly the U.S. has done. He doesn't have a clue as, and I'll get you the other tweet there. Doesn't have a clue as, President Trump said, the entire world was laughing and taking advantage of us. People like little Bob Corker have set the U.S. way back. Now we move forward. So Sarah Sanders was asked a bunch of questions on Jeff Flake not running again, Bob Corker, the feud going on with Bob Corker, some things she said in response, and I really want to hear your comments on this. What did you think about all of this in the press briefing? Write to me on Twitter, at Lookner, at Lookner. On Twitter, I will read your comment on the air. Real quick, though, a couple things Sarah Sanders said in the briefing. She said, she was asked about Jeff Flake not running again, and she said, based on the lack of support that he has from the people of Arizona, it's probably a good move. She also said that Senator Corker was trying to get a shot in on the way out the door at President Trump. She said she hadn't spoken to President Trump since the announcement by Senator Flake. She also said that support of the voters is more behind the president than Senator Corker and Senator Flake. That's what she said. And she also, another thing that she said, Americans don't care about some petty comments from Senator Corker and Senator Flake. She said Americans care about policy and that the press should report on more important things like the fact that the president, she said, has really improved the economy and has helped to defeat ISIS. So those were some of the comments made by Press Secretary Sanders. What do you think? I want to hear what you have to say about this press conference today. Let's see what I have. Some messages here. Greg Jackson writes in, geez, all this talk of civility, maybe they should look at their own networks that have done everything possible to create division and even hatred for Trump. So, one thing you might be referring to is that I know April Ryan asked a question in the briefing, and the question was something like, when is the White House going to start unifying America? It was one of these, that's a question that's not really a question, it's more of a criticism, because it's not like, there's a way of asking that question, which is like, you could say, so Press Secretary Sanders, Sarah, does the White House feel that it's done enough to unify America, in like a nice way? But the way she asked it is like, when's the White House going to start unifying America? It was like kind of that tone. It's just a number of questions are often asked like that in the briefings. And I don't care what side the president is on, Democrat, Republican, whatever. I do like when the questions are questions and not veiled criticisms. Because April Ryan knows basically what she's going to get as an answer. So that question seems more like a criticism. But you might be referring to that question when you say all that talk of civility, because it sounds like what you're saying is that we have the press asking about the president being civil and unifying, and yet you're saying, Greg, that you think the press sows division and even hatred of President Trump. And by the way, thank you for the donations. One of We the People just gave $50 and said, invest in honest news. Thank you so much for the donation. And Lars Anderson gave 55 Swedish krona and said, draining the swamp in progress. Thank you for the donations. Those donations are what let us stay on the air and be an independent source of media. We're agenda free. We don't tell you what to think. If you read it, write in a comment, no matter what your view is, we'll read it as long as it's clean. So we really appreciate you supporting us so that we can be on the air as an alternative to mainstream media. If you want to donate and help keep us on the air, you can go to the bottom of the YouTube chat, click on the $ sign at the bottom of the YouTube chat, or go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. Let me get to some more of your comments here. I want to hear what you thought about the press briefing, about the Jeff Flake news. What do you think about that, about he's not going to run next year? Let's see. At Audacity 313, in response to the news that CNN, I don't know if it's news, but I was saying that CNN stopped reporting, they stopped showing the press briefing. They cut into the press briefing so they could interview Jeff Flake. CNN, Audacity 313 said, LOL, media darling, now roll out the red carpet. Now I will say this, I think if a pro-Trump senator, as opposed to Jeff Flake, who has been critical of President Trump, if a pro-Trump senator had announced today they weren't going to run next year, I don't think CNN would have cut off the White House briefing to interview that senator. I think they would have waited till after the briefing. That's just my opinion. Let's see. Rev18 writes in, oh wait, I'm sorry. I missed something you were replying to. Rev18 sent me a tweet from Laura Ingram, and he said, I think this is a good sum up of Flake. The name says it all. Let me show you what Rev18 sent me real quick. Write to me on Twitter. Let me know your comment at Lookner. So Laura Ingram tweeted out, oops, Flake didn't vote for President Trump and couldn't even write a book without cribbing Goldwater's title. And our viewer, Central Florida for Trump, Rev18 says, I think this is a good sum up of Flake. The name says it all. Thank you for writing in. Thank you for the donation. 9 Ideal said, I am poor, but I love you. But thank you. Any donation, we don't care if it's small, big, it all goes to help us on the air. So we really appreciate that, 9 Ideal. Thank you. Thank you also to the moderators in the chat rooms today for keeping the chat rooms safe and fun places to conduct chats. Barbara Brayley, JC, Real Frank, I see all in the YouTube chat room. And Jude is there too. Jazz Punk is there. And also we have Glenn O and Common Sense on rsbn.tv. Let me keep reading your comments. Let's see. Reagan Better writes in, Trump has been on Senator Flake since day one. No big surprise. Bob Corker media taking for a spin. August West writes, I'm not sure. Let's see here. In response to, I'd sent out a tweet talking about, I'd retweeted a tweet talking about how the first 8 questions in this White House press briefing, 7 were about Flake and Corker. August West wrote, I loved when they'd go all Russia, re. I'm not sure what exactly that's referring to, but thank you for writing. Trump the winner says right side needs to be in the press briefing and ask questions why Jeff Sessions has not appointed a special prosecutor into Uranium One. So that is another news story that came out today. I want to say, is it the House investigating Uranium One? We might be doing a stream about this later. So it's just been, we got a little delayed because the press briefing was supposed to be around 2:30 and it ended up being around 4. So that kind of delayed things here. But let me just get you the story here. This is House Republicans launch, I'll get me out of the way. House Republicans launch new probes into Obama-era Uranium One deal, FBI handling of Clinton case. So I think we might do a stream later today on the Uranium One thing. So we won't get off on that now because it wasn't talked about much during the press briefing. But we're going to try to do a stream about that later today. So keep your eye out. If you want to know when we're coming on the air for our streams, subscribe to, and our coverage of live breaking news, subscribe to us on YouTube and click the notifications bell. That way you'll get notified when we're coming on the air. Also, you can follow us at Right Side Broadcasting on Facebook, and on Twitter, we're at RSB Network. I am on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner, and you can follow me there if you like breaking news. I post a lot of breaking news stuff. And write to me with comments about the press briefing today and about what's going on in the news today. I want to hear what you have to say. Dan Tobin says, it's been over a year since I've watched CNN, haven't missed it. In response to my post that CNN stopped covering Sarah Sanders to show an interview with Jeff Flake, SH Decoder Ring said, CNN needs to feed the other Flakes. Captain Graybeard said, in response to the CNN stopping covering the briefing, said, can't pay attention to the actual news, got to spin the narrative. Central Florida for Trump said, Revolution 2018 is happening right before our eyes without a dollar spent. MAGA, great job today. Bill Dat Wall says of CNN, they're bananas. Jason says, how is it an issue if CNN cut away to show interview with Jeff Flake? Flake is more important than Sanders. So I'm not saying interviewing Flake isn't important. What I'm saying is the Sanders briefing probably had no more than 5 or 10 minutes to go at that point. It seems like CNN could have, if they wanted to, waited. Like, is that literally the only time they had to interview Jeff Flake? Or they could have interviewed him and showed it right after the briefing. So, I mean, they had options there. And I'll say again, I might be wrong, but I watch a lot of media and I watch a lot of CNN to know what's going on there. And I do think that if this was a senator who said they weren't going to run next year and they were pro-Trump, I have a hard time believing that CNN would have stopped covering the briefing for that. And I don't know, and you might say, well, they're out for ratings, but it seems like if you're cutting away from the White House press briefing to show Jeff Flake, you're targeting a certain type of audience, and that audience is not a pro-Trump audience. So anyways, that's my issue with it. But my point is they could have easily done both, even if they had to like delay even if Flake was like, I literally can only talk in this 1 minute time. I have to talk now. They could have just recorded it and shown it 3 minutes later if they really wanted to. So that's my thought. But feel free to disagree with me. I'm happy to read your comments when you write in. Angela Wagner says, Jeff Flake is going to be the press's new darling and their new narrator for Trump bashing. Dr. Buxter says, CNN will throw in a side of Corker and then a McCain as dessert. Mike Hoover says, CNN cut away to show Flake because he has an anti-Trump message. Susan Simpson says Sarah Sanders wasn't saying S anyways, nothing but lies. I Am Spooky says, how convenient they cut away as Sarah destroyed Bob Corker and Jeff Flake for being grandstanding dunces. Oh, some more comments here. Trump the Winner says, CNN planned to interrupt the press briefing. Nothing happens at CNN if it's not staged or planned. Reagan Better says, Steve, Huckabee didn't say anything about the protester at Capitol Hill with Russian flags. I don't think anyone asked about it. That's another thing that happened today that was a little crazy. So there was a protester who threw flags or pieces of a flag, a Russian flag, at President Trump today as he was walking in the Capitol. And it was crazy to me that this protester had gotten into so close to the president and was like embedded with all of the journalists who were there. And it seemed like some sort of security breakdown. But let me show you the footage of that. It was just very odd. And it's a guy who, it turns out, did a similar thing, pretending to be a reporter to get close to Jared Kushner in July. So, I mean, that makes it extra bad, because you would think if that guy had that incident with Jared Kushner in July, they would put him on some sort of list and make sure that person doesn't get credentials to go in the Capitol and be 4 feet away from the president or 10 feet away from the president or whatever. But let me show you that clip here. So this is the tweet I sent out. How is a protester getting so close to the president, getting into the press gaggle that's so close to the president? This was Eliza Collins, she is from USA Today, sent this out this morning, and it says, a protester made it into the press gaggle, no clue how. So she's there with all the press and started screaming about treason as Trump walks into the Capitol. So let's play that for you.
Mr. President, any response to Bob Corker? Any response to Bob Corker?
Trump is treason! Trump is treason! Trump is treason! Trump is treason!
So what kind of security is that lets that guy in there? Especially when this had happened. It turned out to be the same guy, I believe. So this protester is Ryan Clayton. So this is from July. Protester tries to get Kushner to sign Russian flag. A protester tried to get White House advisor Jared Kushner to sign a Russian flag. And this tweet from Manu Raju says, in July, protester pretended to be a reporter and jumped over my shoulder and threw a Russian flag at Kushner, demanding that he sign it. This is this guy, Ryan Clayton. And I believe Ryan Clayton, unless I made some mistake, was also the same protester as today. No, that's not what I want. This is what I saw being reported. Now, maybe I read it. Maybe I got bad information. Let's look it up and see. So, I know James O'Keefe said it was Ryan Clayton. But I thought some other people said it was Ryan Clayton too. Anyways, this is from TPM. This woman is verified, and she says it was Ryan Clayton, a frequent anti-Trump protester who passed out Russian flags at CPAC. Then this person, Robert McGuire, who's from Open Secrets DC, said it was also Ryan Clayton. So a bunch of people are saying it was Ryan Clayton. I can't personally confirm this at this point, but a lot of people are saying it's Ryan Clayton. So if it was Ryan Clayton, if that's the same person who did the same thing to Jared Kushner, how could he be allowed into the Capitol saying he's pressed when he's already done that thing to Jared Kushner? I don't know. I find that very worrisome. Rocky Sanchez writes in, great news that Jeff Flake will not seek re-election. Time for McCain to step down. Also, and have 2 strong conservative senators from Arizona. Gwen 100% Trump writes in, they already tried the civility attack during the campaign. Voters made it clear concern is immigration, taxes, border security, health insurance, economy. And that reminds me of something Sarah Sanders did say today. She was asked about if there's concern over President Trump's tweets, and she said something like the voters they didn't elect President Trump to be weak, they elected him to be strong, when she was asked about his tweeted attacks. You're watching Right Side Broadcasting's post-show coverage for the White House press briefing. I am Steve Lickner. We are reading your comments on the air about the press briefing and about the different stories that are coming up today, happening today. The big news that just happened right before the press briefing is that Jeff Flake announced he is not going to run next year for re-election to the Senate, and also he gave remarks in the Senate critical of President Trump. And wanted to mention again, if you enjoy our coverage, we are viewer supported. Your donations are what keeps us on the air. So if you like our coverage and you'd like to see continue, then please feel free to make a donation, because that would help us stay on the air. You can donate by going to the YouTube chat room and going to the bottom of the chat room and clicking on the little dollar sign there at the bottom of the YouTube chat, or going to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. We love to be on the air covering news for you, bringing you agenda-free coverage of the news, not telling you what to think, hearing what you have to say. So, but your donations allow us to do that. So thank you for those of you who donated, and please consider doing so if you want to see more coverage. And also, I'm checking my phone here because I feel like the AC might have gone off in my unit. Let's see what happened here. What is it saying here? Yeah, why is this happening? Oh yeah, see, I got to turn it down. I can do it from my phone. They're not even paying me, but my apartment has this thing like Nest, where it's like a smart thermostat where you can control it from your phone. It's kind of cool, actually. See, I just turned it down right here. Anyways, they should pay me after that. Real endorsement. But we're taking your comments here. Write to me on Twitter if you have any thoughts on the press briefing or the big stories today. Patriot of Truth says, I really love the right side. Thank you for saying that. John Stanton says, Trump has 2 less Republicans fighting against what Americans who voted for Trump want. You're talking about Corker and Flake. Trump the winner says, right side needs to get into that press room and ask questions for the voters. Well, at this point, we wouldn't even have a person to be in that press room. We're so small right now. We're just trying to stay on the air and bring you coverage. Maybe one day when we expand, that can happen. Okay, let me just make sure I'm caught up with your messages here. Jeremy Pesnell writes in, Steve, at least we can be thankful today that Trump's Benghazi wasn't alluded to, other than the one question about whether or not there was proper coverage over the area that was requested in March. War and peacetime missions aren't all roses and candy and mistakes. Accidents and death happen. The press is not entitled to every answer first. Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you, Chief President Chat. Thank you for writing in, Jeremy. So there were a couple questions still about the phone call President Trump made to the widow and what General Kelly said about it after. And one of the questions was a question I think has probably been asked before, but one of the members of the press said, Secretary Sanders, will you acknowledge that General Kelly was inaccurate in saying what he said about Representative Wilson, and when he said that she took credit for getting funding for this FBI building back in 2015, and Secretary Sanders said no, she didn't feel that he had mischaracterized what she said. So no apology. Doesn't look like we're going to get any change of position on that from the White House. Also, I'll repeat something I've said before. I don't mind the press asking questions about Niger. I think any operation where soldiers are hurt or die should be asked about, and the press should look into that, and we should get to a point where we're hearing answers about why it happened, so it doesn't happen again. But I do feel like at this point the questioning about Niger is going on longer, unfortunately, than questioning about the two big Navy accidents that happened where even more soldiers died. I mean, it's terrible when one soldier's died, but I believe it was 10 in one and 14 in the other. These two huge accidents where a Navy destroyer in the South Pacific ran into a cargo ship in both cases. That was a few months ago. And we've still not gotten detailed explanations for why that happened. Some commanders have been let go. We haven't gotten detailed explanations. And I think the press should be asking about that. So I hope they're not asking about Niger, because Niger has this sort of anti-Trump spin on it, which is that President Trump made this phone call, which some people don't like. I hope that's not the reason they're covering Niger more than they covered the Navy accidents. I want them to cover all these things. So, just my 2 cents. JC, one of our moderators, writes in, Steve, I'm still not tired of winning. President is on fire. RSBN is on fire. Drain the Swamp 2018 and vote Trump 2020. Hashtag RSBN Mod Squad. Shout out to the RSBN chat room. Thank you, JC, and all the other moderators in there and on RSBN.TV. We appreciate your hard work. P. Tudsbury says, Flake now has nothing to lose. Easy for him to attack Trump. With both, it's a good point, P. Tudsbury, with both Corker and Flake, they're not running for re-election, so they're not going to be restrained in any way that they would normally be if they were running for re-election. So we'll see what happens. Rev 18 says, all kidding aside, all of these senators, including Corker and Flake, sat on hands while Obama systematically destroyed the country. Diana says, in response to my posting that CNN stopped covering the briefing to show Jeff Flake, Diana says, cry me a river. P-Cell writes in, I know the media is presenting the Jeff Flake story as a negative thing for the president, but I disagree. I think it is an opportunity to eventually get new people elected who support the American people's agenda. Thanks, Steve and RSBN. Thanks for writing in, P-Cell. Greg writes in, CNN argued about this. Flake a conservative? Would a conservative, says Greg, subvert the constitutional principle of treaties? His Corker amendment nullified the supermajority to enact treaties. Instead of requiring 2/3 to pass a treaty, his amendment required 2/3 to vote against it. Therefore, only 40 votes were needed to basically pass. I want to look up this. Now, the Iran treaty was never submitted to Congress. The Iran treaty Congress only voted on whether to like criticize the treaty, but they weren't voting on whether to approve it because it was never submitted to approval. And was the amendment having to do with that vote? I'm not sure. I have to go and look up. I'm looking up an article here on this. I'll have to do some more research on this. But and Greg, maybe you weren't referring to the original vote, but it is just aside from that, I do find it an interesting point that there's a debate whether the Iran deal should have been submitted to Congress, the Senate, for approval because of the constitutional requirement that Senate approves treaties, and I think the Obama administration claimed it was not a treaty, so it didn't have to go to the Senate for approval. Okay, I think we've covered your messages. All right, I think we're going to wrap up the post show now. I'm going to try to do a stream tonight, at least one, on, maybe we'll do one on Uranium One. That's a whole thing. that's a story where even when you read like reputable press outlets on both sides, you find like details missing, and it's hard to put together all the details. So maybe we'll do that. I'm going to try to get on the air tonight and do that. So keep an eye out. Subscribe to us on Right Side Broadcasting. Click on the notifications bell to know when we're coming on the air with our live news coverage. Also, if there's breaking news, of course, we'll be on the air tonight. And also follow us on Facebook, Right Side Broadcasting. On Twitter, we're at RSB Network. You can follow me on Twitter at Lookner. Thank you, Jake Seals, for producing today and doing an excellent job. And Jake is on Twitter at JacobRSBN Music. And thank you to the moderators in the chat rooms for doing a great job. And thank you to the people who donated. That helps keep us on the air. If you want to donate, keep Right Side on the air. Go to the bottom of the YouTube chat, click on that $sign, or go to rsbn.tv/donate. rsbn.tv/donate. You can even get free stuff like this Right Side mug. Oops, I'm blocking it. By donating, setting up a monthly donation. To find out about that, go to rsbn.tv/donate. And I'm about to finish up here. Who did I forget? I think I got to everybody. Anyways, thank you again. Thank you, most importantly, for everybody. Thank you to everybody who sent in your comments and let me read them, and to everybody for watching out there on YouTube, on Facebook, maybe on Twitch today. I'm not sure. So we're gonna wrap it up here right now. Should be on tonight with at least one other stream, and that's it for now. So from all of us here at Right Side Broadcasting, have a great day and enjoy your evening.
continue to hit historic highs, and